mobile app, and it's the easiest way to connect with your friends and share things with them. So people use Bump to share photos with friends, to exchange contact information, to recommend apps, recommend music, that kind of stuff.
Right, and so you guys, I think initially everyone heard of them as a contact sharing app, right?
Yeah, we originally built Bump there were three of us, me, Dave, and Andy. We built it as a fun nights and weekends project. We thought there was this really big opportunity if you could find a way to use your phone to interact in the real world. And we released it on the App Store, and people loved it, and it started growing like crazy. So we all stopped what we were doing and took it more seriously.
And how many users do you have now?
We have had 27 million installs, which makes us the 8th most installed app on iPhone in the US and 3rd most installed app on iPhone in Japan. And we've got a little over 8 million monthly actives right now.
Awesome. And do you want to talk maybe just a little bit more about the sort of the process for getting from, hey, this is cool, this is kind of taking off, to 8th most popular iPhone app?
Yeah, it was really a process of spending more time and taking it more seriously. So we launched it just as this.
That's the secret, spend more time on it. Okay, great.
Well,
really helpful.
we had this idea, like, would anyone care if you could bump two phones and share contacts? Like, people with business cards, you have all these other ways that you can share contacts on your phone. You could MMS them. OS3 had just come out, so you could Bluetooth a contact. You could email a contact. You could type in a phone number. And our whole hypothesis was if we make this really easy and fun, then that's better than all of the other ways. And so we wanted to get to testing that as quickly as possible, release the app in the App Store, and within, I think, about a month and a half, had our first million trial users, and that made us take it really seriously. Like, we didn't think we'd get that many in a year. And so when we had that in a month and a half, it was kind of a drop everything, move out to California, and
you raised funding, right?
Yeah, so we had applied to Y Combinator back before we had launched, and when we interviewed, we had actually launched, and so we were able to do it for them and show good usage numbers. But yeah, we actually raised money, I think, a lot slower than we could have. We spent a long time really figuring out where we wanted to take the product and listening to our users and doing a lot of experiments. So we moved out to California. We launched in March of 2009 and didn't raise money, didn't raise our Series A until October and November of that year from Sequoia.
So you were doing a lot of couch surfing?
Yeah, so two of us were living in Chicago when we started the app, and Dave and I moved out to California, and between May of 2009 and February of 2010, I was living on couches, and I think Dave made it all the way until June of 2010. Long after we raised the money, we were still living.
Is there some reason we should care about this?
Yeah, well, it was. We were so busy that, like, it wasn't even a question of finances at the time. We just didn't have time to find places to move.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about sort of that kind of your vision for the product and how it's evolved. Like you said, we started with contacts, moved into sort of this broader platform for social sharing. When and how did you make that decision?
Yeah, it was a really interesting evolution. So we originally envisioned people using the original Bump app to share contacts in a very serious and formal setting. Maybe it would replace business cards, but it would be in more of that context. And when we started watching people use it, they were using it more nights and weekends, really in social atmospheres. And so we started thinking about what features could we build that people would want to use with their friends and family, rather than with colleagues or business acquaintances. And so since we saw that shift and since we started developing for that user base, our traffic's gone crazy.
And was that sort of a tough decision for you to say, well, maybe sort of what our idea was initially isn't exactly what we're going to end up doing?
It wasn't, and I'd say we still struggle with it because contact sharing is still very important, and it's very tied to our brand. Most people were introduced to us as a way of sharing contacts, but most people get engaged with us as a way of sharing photos, and so both user acquisition and engagement are important. So it's a delicate balance for us.
Mm-hmm. And so you were telling me about sort of an investor meeting where there was sort of the question, what is your user acquisition model? What was your answer to that?
Well, so we didn't have a great answer to that question. We And if we had raised the money earlier, I don't think we would have had a lot of credibility. But so we waited until we had 4 or 5 million users before going out to Sand Hill Road and pitching for our Series A. And one of the really interesting things about our growth, and like, we never expected to get as many users as we did quickly. And so we spent a lot of time trying to understand, how did this happen? And Bump is inherently this 2-person social app. There's really no value to it unless you're using it with another person. And so what we found when we looked at our data is, if you look at the amount of time between when someone first opens Bump and when they use it for the first time, it's almost always less than 15 minutes. So Bump is growing through word of mouth, through our existing users. They either want to get something from one of their friends and they think Bump is the best way to do it, or they want to give something to one of their friends and they think Bump is the best way to do that. And that has continued to be our most powerful user acquisition channel, and to the tune of about 100,000 downloads a day.
And that's not necessarily something you guys have thought a lot about, so as your model being, it's more just that's what happened.
Yeah, that's what happened, and we've tried to be careful to not break it.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you think might break it?
Well, so one of the things we've been struggling with recently is, how do you onboard someone when a user's first experience is normally, I want to give or get something in person by bumping. Any kind of registration or any kind of steps that we put in front of the user is either going to cause breakage or frustration and isn't good. But at the same time, there's certain, we have to set users up to some extent. So we had gone on one extreme where there was absolutely no setup and you just opened the app and you could bump. And we found that if users weren't doing certain things, and they probably weren't getting, they were way less likely to become engaged. So I think in the next version of Bump that will be out in a couple of weeks, we have a new onboarding tutorial with some nice illustrations that hopefully walk people through. And it's tough because it's simple things like, we'll ask someone for their location. And if you don't know Bump and you haven't used Bump, and you probably don't understand how it works either, and that we need to know your location for it to work reliably, you're probably going to hit no, because your instinct is, no, I don't want to tell this random app what my location is. But if you want Bump to work reliably, we need to know. And so we're trying to figure out ways to better onboard people while still having it be low friction enough they can bump right away.
Okay, so I was talking to some people earlier today, and I'd say, oh, I'm interviewing the co-founder of Bump later today, and they'd say, oh man, that is an awesome app. And the second thing they'd say is like, man, those guys raised a lot of money. So how much have you raised from whom?
In total, we've raised about $20 million. We just closed a Series B with Andreessen Horowitz at the end of December for $16.5 million, and Mark is joining our board, which is great.
Awesome. And so maybe the place to start with that would be just, why did you want to raise that much money?
Yeah, so the team kind of sat down and looked at, what are we trying to build, and what are we trying to build over the next couple of years? And we really want to build this app and this technology that everyone uses as a way to interface with the real world. And to do that well, and to build all the applications of that we wanted, we just needed a much bigger team. So we kind of worked back from what is the medium-term vision for the product, and what are all the people who we need to be able to execute on that. I'd say right now, half of the stuff we're doing we think is B quality, and we want to get it up to A quality, and then there's a bunch of things that we aren't doing. So almost all that money will be going towards salaries, and we're hiring a lot of designers and developers right now.
Awesome. And so on the flip side, how did those meetings go when you sort of explained to the Mark and Chris why this is actually going to a huge opportunity and not just a mobile app that's going to get sold for a few $1 million?
Yeah, well, it was really interesting. So we never actually went out fundraising. There were a few partners at firms that we really liked, and we were trying to stay in touch with and get to know better. And last fall we went and had a meeting with John, Ben, and Mark over at Andreessen Horowitz, just to give them an update, share what we were building, share our vision, hear their feedback. And the outcome from that meeting was you may not be fundraising, but we'd love to finance you if you're willing to take money right now. So we were able to work out a deal. But what Mark kind of told us, what really excited him about it was, there's probably going to be multiple social networks. Facebook is this comprehensive graph, but it's difficult to, sometimes there's a lot of things you may want to do with not everyone who's on Facebook, and it's difficult to get everyone to do lists or groups or whatever. And so what we're building is this social network that's based on who you interact with in the real world and all the types of things you want to do with them, with kind of the explicit controls that are needed in those situations.
So we have about 9 minutes left, and I've got a long list of really messily written questions that I can keep going through. But we can also take questions from the audience. So as you have questions, just come up to the microphones. It's really bright up here, so if I don't see you, just wave your hands, throw something. You can just say, hey, listen, and I'll totally stop. Great. So hopefully we'll get to that in a little bit. So the mics are right there whenever you guys have questions. So in terms of those different social networks, Facebook has said that on mobile especially, they really want to be I guess everywhere really. They want to be the social layer, that underlies everything. So have you guys incorporated Facebook?
Yeah, we have incorporated Facebook. We've incorporated it in a couple ways. So one of the ways is that you can bump to become friends with someone on Facebook, and I think we may still be the only non-Facebook app that has access to the friending API. And so it's nice to be able to bring that digital interaction into the real world instead of meeting someone and going home and then finding them on Facebook and maybe having trouble finding them or whatever. You can just bump and become friends with them. But what's been more successful lately is starting in December, we opened up bumps so that you could original bump was in-person sharing only. In July, we released version 2 that lets you connect to people with bump and share a photo in person, or you can share a photo through message later. And in December, we opened up so that you can see which of your friends in your address book and which of your friends on Facebook have bump and send messages to them without bumping. We had a bunch of people that would say, bump's my favorite way to share photos, but I haven't been in the same room as my mom and I want to connect with her. So how can you make it easier to do that? So that's been our most recent Facebook integration, and it's been really good.
So how do you look at Facebook in the sense of, this is obviously a social graph that we want to tap into, but at the same time, potentially competitive as well?
Potentially, it remains to be seen, whether or not our vision and their vision overlap in any way. Right now, they've been a great partner for us, and we're collaborating on some other things as well. But I think we were allowing users to kind of curate their own network for our specific application. The phone is a very special device and very different from the web. It's always with you. Hopefully you've enabled pushing notifications and it can interrupt you. It knows where you are. It's got access to this great base graph with your address book. And so we think there's different applications that you'll want to do on your phone than you necessarily want to do on your web. And Facebook's done a great job of bringing their web experience to mobile, but there's some mobile-specific things that we are really focused on.
I think we have a question over there.
Yeah. Hi, thanks so much. I'm Carmen Benitez with Fetch Plus. I'm interested in finding out, currently you're a C2C, and I'm interested in finding out how you plan to commercialize to a B2C type of model.
So I guess there's two different ways we're thinking about that. The first one is we've taken our technology and packaged it up as an SDK that anyone can use. So there's 400 or 500 companies that have integrated our technology. PayPal's a great example. In the PayPal app, you can bump someone to give them money. Another great recent integration is with the Where app, and you can bump to get a restaurant recommendation that takes into account both people's tastes. So, great in-person interaction. The other thing that we're working on this year, and we're really just starting to figure out is if our vision is, we want to be the best, easiest way to use your phone to interact in the real world. You're not just interacting with other people, but you might walk into a store or you might want to interact with a brand. And so how do we take our technology, how do we take our distribution and facilitate those interactions as well? And so we'll be making some announcements later this year around that.
So I think there are a lot of companies that are mobile companies demonstrating a demo. I think a lot, maybe even all of them are at least a mobile component. Can you talk a little bit, just sort of stepping back from Bump particularly, are there sort of larger ideas that you have about how social works on mobile and how that might be different than on a PC?
Yeah, I think that, so from our own experience, there's kind of been 3 big lessons learned when it comes to social. One is that we're distributed socially. We're distributed from friend to friend, normally in person. 2 is that we're used socially. It's normally sharing photos and music and apps and social situations with friends and family. 3rd is that we're engaged socially. Like if you have, there's this knee in our kind of engagement distribution. If you have 5 friends, you're much more likely to be engaged than if you don't. So, so having other people, using the app with our users helps drive more engagement. But I think just taking a step back from us, the phone's a really powerful device in that it's always with me, and it can interrupt me, and it's really powerful, and it's also really easily abused. So I think in the last 6 months we've really started to see some of the potential there, where apps are building directly off of the address book, which can be a great user experience in the sense that I don't have to find my friends, I don't have to add friends, I can just very easily and seamlessly see which of my friends are using the app that I can connect and interact with. But it can also be used as a tool for evil, in the sense that, like, any of us with an iPhone has gotten an app that will send you a push notification every 15 minutes when someone you don't know just joined the network, and they're doing everything they can to draw you back in. And some apps who've used that mechanic have grown really quickly, but I bet they're alienating a lot of users and causing a lot of uninstalls also. So you have this really powerful opportunity to be a big part of someone's life and to be always with them. And in the long term, you have to focus on the user experience.
I mean, do you think that for you guys, as you look at those issues, are there sort of like kind of guiding principles that you look at that this is, aggressive and maybe, making us more viral, helping us spread without being sort of over the top?
Yeah, so right now we've made, we've enabled this feature where you can see what your friends from your address book are using Bump. We've made a conscious decision so far to not push when we make a new match and not automatically connect you. So it's more like it's this suggested list of friends that you have the option of adding. And just by adding them, it doesn't do anything to bug the other user. We promote that you should interact with them, you should send a photo, you should send them a message, but we try to avoid being overly spammy. It may, we may be too far on the conservative side on that. There's definitely a lot of value in using push to re-engage people, and we're trying to find that right balance.
Are there other apps that you look at as sort of setting a really good example of sort of how you use social and how you use sort of viral and push to sort of acquire users on phones?
Yeah, I think that like in the last quarter of last year, both Viber and Tango came out, and they both did an excellent job of doing a quick and seamless integration directly with your address book. And these are really tough applications, right? You're trying to do voice over IP, you're trying to do video calls. They have the same network effect problem that we have. If the other end doesn't have it, then there's no utility. And I think they did a good job, of being one of the earliest companies to really build on top of the address book.
Mm-hmm. And so in the next week, you talk a little bit just about what your goals are and how many users you're going to have a year from now.
As many as possible. I don't know exactly. Tens of millions of actives, I hope. We're back in July of 2010 when we released version 2, we had about 1.5 or 2 million monthly actives, and so now at the end of February we have over 8 million. So we've been growing really quickly in terms of monthly actives, and are putting a lot of resources into understanding what engages people and try and make it as easy as possible for them to advance through all that steps early enough that we keep them.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming, Jake, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks, Anthony.